I want you to imagine a world of affluence, but somehow your little rental home, box in the sky, perhaps, went from costing you a third of your income to perhaps as much as half of what you earn. Now, what if I told you that this may be partially due to an algorithm, a code that sets the price for your lease, and that this algorithm is likely to be around for years and years to come? YieldStar, owned by is a program that prices rental properties for property managers and landlords. It seems their main function is to push up rental prices. Observe. This program takes factors from the market, comparable rentals, supply, demand. It is far more efficient and precise compared to human leasing agents scribbling on their little notepads.
But here is the difference. Anyone who subscribes to it
puts in their specific properties information, how many are vacant, square footage, flooring, finishes, all with their confidential price strategies, and all that information gets warehoused in one location, then leverages that information to make better comps for all of its users. Do you see it? Allow me to humanize it for you. The program is now a guy named Bob. Bob's only job is to get rents as high as possible. You and all your competitors tell Bob what rent prices you wish to have and hand over all your property information. Then Bob comes up with a strategy and tells you how you should price accordingly, individually of course, but also all at the same time.
But it's not Bob doing this. It's not a man. It's a program, which makes it so much more.
One of the algorithm's developers told ProPublica that leasing agents were often peers of the people they were renting to. Jeffrey Roper is then quoted as stating, "We said there is way too much empathy going on here. This is one of the reasons we wanted to get pricing off-site. See, leasing agents who traditionally price their buildings tend to take issue with raising rents into the triple figures at any single time. Maybe they'll just increase it $50 or $75. And after speaking with the tenant one-on-one, you might even give little concessions. But programs do not compromise. All right. And now I can't keep doing this voice. Hugo Weaving was way better at this than me. I'd like to talk about the Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890.
And it was passed at the time of the Gilded Age, when rubber barons ruled.
The law was passed by Congress to promote competition within the economy by prohibiting companies from colluding or merging to form a monopoly. It addressed concerns of consumers who felt they were paying high prices on essential goods, and by competing companies who believed they were being shut out of their industries by larger corporations. This act made it so that anyone who attempted such acts would face up to a $100 million fine and even up to 10 years in prison. The Clayton Act and the Federal Trade Commission Act closely followed to strengthen the antitrust actions, and these acts took down some real big monopolists. For example, the Standard Oil Trust, which refined 90 to 95% of all the oil in America, was taken down when President Howard Taft utilized the Sherman Antitrust Act. forcing the trust to divest itself of 33 companies within the trust.
So, when YieldStar started buying out its only true competitor, LRO, which would bring the total number of units that they price to 19.7 million out of 45 million total units in America, that it might trip some antitrust laws. And you'd be right, the government actually did take notice of this, and that is when the Department of Justice took on the case. But before we go into the ruling that the DOJ made, I'd like to go into this hypothetical scenario.
I want you to imagine that there is a program that has the capacity to create a form of hive mind with nearly half of all the players in a given game under its control. Everyone else is teamless. One may be concerned that this could create tens of millions of zombie units that mindlessly take orders from a single source, and has them all act on their collective behalf. With an effective coordinated effort, this zombie army could take command of the entire field quite easily.
Just think of the spoils one can get from such a union. I mean, if I controlled a hive mind like that, think of the number of likes I'd get for dressing up as Agent Smith from The Matrix while running around at the Supreme Court with armed guards staring at me. It would be, I'd get a lot of likes.
One could even say this hypothetical scenario could create a pseudo price leader. Price leader? What's that? A price leader is a force that is so strong in a market that it influences the prices of a given industry, forcing other companies within the space to price accordingly. This is especially effective on a good where demand is inelastic. Any macroeconomics 101 class will teach you that for the most part, when supply goes down but demand remains the same, then it is an inelastic resource, like housing. But rental prices are elastic, because people need to live somewhere. So when you constrict supply, prices go up. Now imagine a program that could actually constrict daily supply by lining up all the rentals in an area in a coordinated fashion, pushing rents up. If that were to be happening, then that'd be quite the tool for collusion. Back to the real program. See, I don't actually know the ins and outs of YieldStar's program, and I can't say what it's actually doing, but in regards to supply and demand, RealPage stated on their own website that it uses, quote, disciplined analytics that balance supply and demand to maximize revenue growth. At least it used to. Seems they took that down.
But all we can hope for is that none of these hypothetical scenarios carry over into reality, because the DOJ passed the merger. I will say, though, that YieldStar's one of their main developers, Jeffrey Roper, was quoted as saying in regards to the merger, I was really surprised that the DOJ let that one through. I need something stronger. But perhaps this quote is not as dystopian as it may seem. The program could simply be using supply and demand information it gets from market data and the data of its clients is fairly pricing accordingly. It is possible it is not making any suggestions to its customers beyond that, and that it never misuses the information it is given in any way. It is also true that the leasing agents do attempt to get the same basic information as the program, but their information is not nearly as granular, which at the face of it does create a superior product. And so there is a case that blaming RealPage for just being better at collecting and giving arguably better suggestions from that data is completely legal, and that they shouldn't be reprimanded for simply being better at what they do. And there are many market forces out there that are increasing rents. It is not just YieldStar by any means. Also, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know the ins and outs of YieldStar software, and I'm not privy to the reasons why the DOJ allowed the merger, so I have no capacity to judge it. Also, while the intent of this material is designed to inform you as best as possible, I could be possibly biased because I have a separate company from this one that manages thousands of rental units and have worked as a broker to the largest private equity firms on the planet. Some of them very likely use this software. So do your own research and make your own assessment.
All right, we did that. So here's the increase in rent across the country over the past few years. You'll see many renters are seeing double-digit rent increases, especially after 2020. However, the wage growth has barely moved percentage-wise, closer to 3 to 4%. And this is happening during an even heavier inflation period, meaning real wages are actually going down, which is greatly increasing the number of cost-burdened Americans. And these rent growths seem to be higher where a combination of YieldStar and where many of the rental properties in an area are owned and are managed by a few. For example, in Seattle, in the Belltown zip code, 70% of the market rate rental apartments are managed by just 10 property management companies. All of them are using YieldStar at one or more of their properties. The average rent increases in the area is 33%. But one of the properties with YieldStar averages 42%, and another complex went up by 33% in a single year. But another thing to note here is that prices to buy pretty much everything have gone up, not just in housing. So with all that said, we should not be living in a world as affluent as ours, where people, even those who are active and committed to their careers, must struggle to make basic rental payments, which makes one wonder if this is a recession at all. But instead, an excuse to just take a larger share of the same-sized pie. So I start to ask, is there a point at which too much is being taken? And at what point does all this become no longer human?
Tune in to the Broker Bob channel or watch this video because the algorithm knows what makes you happy.